Testing, 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 1, 2, 3. Testing, 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 1, 2, 3.
Okay, we will call to order our Committee of the Whole and start by recognizing that we are holding our meeting today on the unceded traditional territories of the Hupa-Chesed and Sishot First Nations. Are there any late items to add to the agenda from councillors? Seeing none, any late items from the corporate officer?
No, Madam Mayor.
Great, then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon, all in favor. Carried. And we have minutes from the meeting held at 4 p.m. on March 15th, 2021, which probably was our last Committee of the Whole, given everything that's happened the last year. Would somebody like to move approval of adoption of the minutes? Moved by Councillor Poon, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor. Carried. No correspondence, so we will move right into new business, which is the 5-year financial plan, 2022 to 2026. And welcome our Director of Finance, Andrew.
Plan. Took a lot of effort trying to get a lot of new employees onboarded as far as process, and we've been working through that, and we've had some changes to our budgeting software, so everyone's been great as far as their support through our process. So every year, the financial plan must be adopted by May 14th in order to meet the statutory deadlines for filing and ensuring that we have everything set to collect taxes every year. We are targeting the April 11th council meeting to have the financial plan adopted, and then the tax rates would be coming to the next council meeting on April the 25th. So today we're here to introduce council with some high-level overview of the financial plan, some of the things that have changed, some of the things that we've been working on, some of the things that we've recognized in the financial plan, and putting these changes in place in the 2022-2026 financial plan. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and then on the 31st, so next Monday, we will provide the full, complete financial plan to council and the public. We also have a Committee of the Whole meeting on the February 22nd. This is an opportunity to have some engagement with council and staff and the public to directly engage with council on that financial plan. We also have the ETown Hall on March 7th. This will occur at 7 o'clock at night. It will be an electronic platform that will provide the public, once again, the opportunity to have a look at the financial plan and provide that input. But when we look at the financial plan and the opportunities we have, council, the public, all have opportunities over the next few months, including the regular council meetings in March and February, and up until the adoption on April the 11th, if that is the adoption date that council agrees to. So here's a more detailed plan that we have as far as the timeline. As you can see, there's 5 council meetings that we have in that time frame. We have a couple Committee of the Wholes after this one, including that ETown Hall. And at any time, we could add more meetings if required or if needed. So, and guiding the financial plan, we are looking at council's strategic priorities. Once again, we've looked at some of the projects that we've undertaken in the past couple years and some of the priorities that council has set, including the 3-stream solid waste collection. Council, if you recall, we've been working directly with the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, ensuring that we have a 3-stream waste system in place that is one of the lowest on the island as far as 3-stream collection. It also helps divert the organic waste from the landfill and improves the environmental impact that the city has in the processing of our waste. All said, with the lowest cost opportunity for methane gas collection through this new method, it really reduces the cost in the long term for city residents. Connecting the Keys is another project that we're still awaiting some grant results as far as that is concerned. And we're working on that phased approach over the last few years here and continued into next year. The SOMAS lands, the redevelopment is also in the financial plan. We've included some funding to address some of the background work that needs to be undertaken for that priority. And all the levels of service that we provide to city residents. You have to think that going back to 1912, councils from the past have set the levels of service, including the levels of service that the current council sets, and we haven't reduced those levels of service in this term. So developing the plan, obviously we have the 2021-2025 that really is the framework for providing this draft financial plan that's for 2022-2026. Obviously we have been seeing cost inflation over the past few months that has been stronger than we've seen in the past few years. With the fifth year of the financial plan, we see a incremental increase based on the CPI that we anticipate. And we look at line items bit by bit and understanding what's in each line item, what is driving cost within the financial plan. And those vary between 1% and 3%. Obviously with external forces and the cost increases that we're seeing from supply and demand for services in the market, we're seeing some cost increases that are impacting the cost and the budget line items that we have. We also have the strategic priorities that are within the financial plan, all maintaining the current levels of service for the services that the city provides. When it comes to the distribution of the tax load within the city, we've had fairly consistent tax distributions across each class, but we are seeing more non-market change in the assessed values that the city has seen. With that, in the current financial plan, or in 2021, sorry, the load is shared across the 4 different classes that are highlighted there, industry being both major and light. But that accounts for virtually all of our tax base, so 99.67%. Residential is at 60%, and obviously both major and light industry is at 22.5%. And commercial is staying steady at about 17.17%. As we go through the draft financial plan, we'll be bringing more information to council, just setting the options for that tax burden. We obviously had the non-market change. We've seen market growth, but the public has to understand that we're not increasing taxes based on that growth that we've seen in the market value of properties. So our financial plan will be based on what is required to balance the budget, and that new assessed value across the community will make up the entire base which we collect or we allocate the taxes for collection this year. So the current financial plan has a property tax increase of 4.97%. This is for the year 2022. In following years, it varies between 4.7 and 4.8. Obviously, as mentioned earlier, the inflationary impact of our costs are seeing some increases in some of our line items, and we've changed the budget to reflect that. The non-market change for residential is at 2.24%, which is another strong year. If you recall, last year it was 1.59. So we're seeing even stronger growth in 2021 for this 2022 year as far as assessed values. Overall, we've seen a 2.07% increase for our non-market change. Now getting into the revenue, as mentioned, 4.97 is the tax increase that is in the draft plan. Council has the ability to make changes and adjust as they see fit, and ensuring that you have that balance between taxation and delivery of service that we need to continue to provide. With our utility tax and our PILT payments, we've reviewed and put what has been realized in the past few years in both those line items. So we'll see that for the financial plan, more reflective of what we've seen in the past few years. Again, sales of service, those such as the organics and the solid waste collection, that is increasing, so we see the sales of service. And curbside waste fees will remain at 180, and we anticipate that being at that stage for the next 2 years at least, and we'll review the costs associated with that sales of service. But once again, I think it's the second lowest cost for solid waste collection on the island for the municipalities that are the same size of us with the 3-stream collection. As far as leases, our leases are revenues, and we are tying those to CPI increases every year. So we're seeing higher revenue from our leases at the Harbor Quay and other small leases that we have. So those are all increasing as we see CPI increase. One section of the financial plan that we continue to see slow recovery from the COVID pandemic is the Parks and Rec revenue. So before the pandemic, it was approximately $500,000 more in anticipated revenue from our recreational facilities. And within the plan, we have to address that and be conservative and expect at least through this half of the year that we wouldn't achieve the revenue that we'd normally see in Parks and Rec. But moving forward, we still have that hesitation from the public to engage in those social and those group activities. So we do want to make sure that we're mindful of that revenue source and reflect accordingly. When it comes to building fees, this is quite a shining star actually as far as revenue year over year. It's incredible how the pandemic has impacted the building and development in the city, and we're seeing significant increases in our building fees year over year. When it comes to our COVID restart funding, those funds are required to be spent by 2022. And we have to identify the funding opportunities that we anticipate using those funds for in 2022. So with that, it's obviously the Parks and Rec is still an area of our financial plan that we need to address, and we do need to set some funding aside so that we could continue to operate our facilities and not increase taxes in that regard. So we'll use some grant funding in that area if council approves, with engagement and improvements as far as our council chambers and our committee room, having the ability to function electronically and ensure that our communication system is up to date. We'll include some funding for that, and some software improvements and some online options for the public as far as accessing information moving forward. So those will come to council for consideration. And of course, with the community gaming funds, we have the casino starting up again. We are seeing those funds start to come through again, and those funds help support our tour center, the chamber. It supports the McLean's Mill operation, economic development, and our CIP. So some of our grant and aids also. So it's great to see those funds coming back. Over the past few years, we've used those COVID funds to support those gaming sources that were supplied those funding. So, when it looks at the expenses overall, once again, the inflationary impact is being seen across everything that anybody does, including the city. So it's important that we budget reflectively. The budget reflects the continued levels of service that the city has provided. Strategic priority is to have the continued levels of service, and that is reflective in some of the line items that you'll see when the financial plan is released. With the QP contract, once again, in the last year, it's a 2% increase. The exempt and council remunerations, those are all based on CIP, and that's at 2.8. That's the average BC CPI that was over 2021. Remembering that in 2020, it was 0.8. So over the past 2 years, it averaged at 1.6%. Other expenses, as mentioned, a 1 to 3 inflationary factor within that financial plan. In general, with the new budgeting software, we're looking in more detail as far as how expenses are landing within each cost item, each expenditure item in the financial plan. And you'll see some swings in between each line item, but that's reflecting where the costs are actually landing in that financial plan. When we look at the bylaw resources, we have a strategic priority from council as far as the community safety building, and we also have resources that are required for that building to operate at a 6-day per week operation, and that's included in the financial plan for once that building is open on 3rd Avenue. We continue to see the reconciliation funds for initiatives that come to council for their decision within the financial plan. When it comes to finance, procurement, projects, payroll resource, we've increased the resources for that within the financial plan to reflect the needs and risk associated with procurement and our payroll work. And with the new standard for the asset retirement obligation, it's a new accounting standard. It's a required standard that we have to meet for 2023. There's some consulting work that we have to do, and that comes down to our assessment of our facilities and what liabilities that we have associated with those buildings, as asbestos or lead paint, and quantifying that and putting that in the financial plan and in the financial statements. And with that, we also have leases that might require us to return a property to a certain state. Those costs that it would take to return that property to a current state in that lease agreement would also have to be quantified in that new standard. Within information systems, we are shifting software costs around to the departments that they land in. So if finance has so many licenses, those costs are allocated to that department. And same with engineering. So it really pulls the cost where it's landing in information systems to the departments that drive that cost. We started doing that last year with some clear software costs that were incurred for fire department or engineering. We continue to do that this year and get to the actual software licensing cost per employee. Much of the software costs that we do see are on a per employee basis moving forward with a lot of cloud-based softwares. And when it comes to HR, staff training and the impacts from COVID in 2020 were reduced to 50%, moving to 70% in 2021, and back to 100% in 2022. Council, the same, we did a 50% reduction in 2020, moving back to 100 in 2021, and that continues to be at 100 in 2022. The RCMP contract, we have obviously the contract that we have at 34 members, and how we budget, I'll get into that in a quick second here. So the service liabilities for the retirement and benefits obligations that we have with that contract, we're paying those back over a period of time, and that's included in this line item. And the administrative costs for Green Timbers or E-Division's administrative costs for the province of BC that we all share in as members of the UBCM contract with E-Division. We do have outstanding wages for the RCMP contract. We've been told to budget on a 2.5% increase year over year since 2017. Now, the RCMP emergency reserve budget is identified as far as the funding to support those costs and offset that over time, but with the length of time, and it's anticipated that we may see a similar payback over a period of years for some municipalities that didn't have the ability to save those funds up over year. So we'll await the final decision on how those funds will be paid back, but we do have the emergency reserve for those funds. And with the RCMP contract, we budget on a 32 member utilization when we commit to 34. So you'll see that our contract with the RCMP is based on a 34, but within our financial plan, we've only seen a utilization of 29 members on average year over year. So we budget accordingly, and any surplus would go into the RCMP reserve. Police admin and support. We do have an information technology position that is being added for the admin of the RCMP contract at our local detachment. With the increasing need for support of IT and the time that it takes, it's important that we support the RCMP and our commitments to the administration of that service within our local office here. So that is adding a half-time position to the admin of the police in the city. With the fire, we're seeing apparatuses being replaced, our pumper 1, and we are looking at our aerial fire trucks. So we are seeing increases in the cost for those replacements over and above what we normally see in IRF. So it's important that we understand if this is an ongoing issue, and we have to maybe have a review of our IRF calculation to ensure that we are meeting the expectations as far as costs and renewal of those assets. Continuing on with expenses, public transit. We've seen support from the senior levels of government as far as the Restart Grant. Those funding opportunities go until March of 2022, and it's about $32,000 that we'll receive in those first 3 months of the year to support the revenue that we anticipate losing. I think most municipalities have seen a significant drop in those revenues, and Port Alberni has not seen as a significant drop as others. So I think we're recovering a little quicker than others with the recovery and ridership going through that pain transit service. Through the engineering and public works, once again, we're looking at prior years and how we've averaged as far as line items within the financial plan. So when council looks at the financial plan, you'll see some significant ups and downs within each line item, but focus in on the overall cost for that service as they are bulked together. So this is using the software that we have as far as identifying the budgetary impacts in each line item and budgeting based on that, and then watching performance as we move forward. Parks and Rec, returning to pre-pandemic expenses. So that was one area of the financial plan that we reduced the costs in Parks and Rec because we understood that the operations would not reflect what we normally would see based on some of the restrictions that we had in the pandemic. More significant in 2020, but we also we were also increasing the amounts that were going through the expense line items within Parks and Rec based on the anticipation that those recoveries, those services that we provide will be a little bit slower to start up again. We continue to put funding in for Parks Resource. That was a position that we identified in 2021, sorry, and that stayed in 2022. And with the tree planting, we continue to do budgeting for that. But with that, those line items, will be $75,000 that we'd see in a capital line item, not in an operational item. So you'll look at the capital plan and that'll be in there. But that's within the Parks service. So curbside collection for our solid waste, we are covering the fees the fees are covering the expenses that are associated with that service moving forward. So we've had additional resources, and you have to think about the resources that were in place for the ACRD to provide the service. They had a separate truck driving around with another employee. We've just increased the deployment of another staff member to operate the vehicles, and now we have that resource essentially moved to the city, and we received the Recycle BC incentive for that service that we provide now. And we have that direct contract now with Recycle BC starting January 1st. Planning and development resources, another strategic priority. We continue to look at the OCP. That process has started, and we will anticipate finishing that up in 2022, but those funds will continue, and we'll pull those funds forward from the prior years. We also have funding for the SOMAS project as far as the redevelopment of that site. In planning, there's some funding for the SOMAS to do some background work. And once again, operational costs throughout 2020 and 2021 were reviewed to see how the service levels and the costs associated with those service levels were lining up in the financial plan. So the capital plan, we are looking at software process improvements. Our accounting system was scheduled to be replaced in 2023, but the service for that software system will continue until 2032. So we have that same software if we choose to continue with that software until then, even though we've been saving up for a new software for the accounting system, with the anticipation that servicing of that software would cease in 2026. The ERF, as mentioned, across all the equipment that we're seeing, the replacement costs are higher than we've anticipated based on that 2% increase year over year in ERF for the cost of the equipment. So we need to review the ERF as far as the anticipated replacement values. Roads. Often our roads are using the gas tax funding, and we continue to use that, a non-tax item. That's grant funding that we receive every year. And storm, continue to do storm and sewer projects within the liquid waste management plan and our commitment to ensuring that we reduce the CSOs for our sewage service. Our facilities, we have many facilities that are aging. When we think about probably our newest facility, it's 20 years old, and we need to ensure that our asset management plan is in place to identify, the projects that we need to ensure these assets live a long life and we renew them. So we do need to have some conversations with council as far as all our facilities. And we will be looking at bringing a recommendation forward for our facilities. And with water and sewer, these are two services that have large capital projects year to year. Often, the fees that we charge for water and sewer cover the cost for these projects. Sometimes we'll have a grant opportunity and we'll have some funds, but service fees pay for water and sewer services. And we continue to do projects in the $1 to $1.3 million range per year for water and sewer. So that is just the high-level review for council. As mentioned, we'll have the financial plan to you next week with the details and more opportunity to have that discussion as we go through the next few months.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and to you and all the managers for all the work that's gone into this so far. I will open it up to council first for any questions, recognizing we don't have the plan in front of us yet, so may not be able to answer questions on specific numbers today, but I think that council, the intent is to move forward with a similar style as we did last year. So any questions that we can put out today, then ideally staff will bring back answers at our next meeting. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, could we get a copy of this presentation? I would appreciate that sent. Thank you. And I'm curious to know, I'll just ramble on and then from there you can take it. The dates for the grants for the key to key would be interesting to know. The other one is inflation. Will inflation be included in the current rate? Like, we have a current rate now for inflation, but inflation seems to be moving even more so faster than we can shake a stick type of thing. And I'm just kind of curious to know if we will be adding more to our inflation rate.
Councillor Solda,
yeah.
I think it might be better if we do one by one,
Okay.
and then you can ask all your questions, but that way we can just give Andrew a chance to respond to. And might not be able to answer all of them today, that's perfectly fine, but starting with the key to key, I can answer that one, okay. That we don't have a date. I know that our staff have been engaging back and forth with the grant with the grant deciders and that we feel very good about it based on those conversations, but we just will never know until the decisions are made. So
Okay.
staff will keep us informed on that one.
Thank you.
And Andrew on inflation.
Yes, on inflation, Madam Mayor, what we've done is looked at where our line items and increased those up based on that 1 or 3%. Because some things we aren't realizing some inflationary measures on, but others we are. So it really is just diving down and looking at what we're spending and having our managers evaluate that a little bit more closely to bring a budget number that might be more reflective. So that's why if you look at the future of the financial plan, we're around that 3 to 4%, and following 2023 to 2026, we're at about 4 to 5%, around 4.8% in the following years. But
Okay.
you know, as we move forward with inflation, obviously we have to react to what is happening in there and make those judgment calls as far as service delivery moving forward.
I just worry about it because, you know, when we budget something and then it goes way over budget, it concerns me. So I just want to make sure we're on that budget. Okay, so the other one is, I thought COVID dollars that the government handed out to us helped Parks and Rec with their deficit because of, we had to close Parks and Rec a lot. So are we not on board even, no?
So I'll Madam Mayor, I'll try to decipher. So with that, I think you're meaning the COVID funds that we've already used for Parks and Rec. Yes, we've already used some of that allocation because of what we've seen as far as revenue from Parks and Rec, but we anticipate that again to happen in 2022 as we look at service delivery and the costs that we have just by having the building open and operating. Even though our hours are less, we still aren't receiving the revenue that we anticipated in 2019. So we're about $500,000 less, and we anticipate that to be the same way for 2022.
And could I just clarify on that? I think it kind of back to Councillor Solda's question, that $500,000 that we're short or anticipating to be short revenue from Parks and Rec for this year is being offset by the COVID restart funds.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Great. So we do still have those funds and they are offsetting that loss this year as well.
Good. Okay, super. And the other one, when you talk about the RCMP, there was nothing about body cameras. I thought we were going to have body cameras eventually. Will that be in the budget? Because there was nothing that mentioned something. And that's pretty big. That's a big expense.
Yes, Madam Mayor. With that is an item that's identified in future costs, but is not included in the contract cost as we speak.
Okay.
So it could be a future cost once that program's deployed.
So, okay, so we'll wait for that presentation. Okay.
I think we could certainly follow up with our officer in charge just to get a better understanding of timeline on that. 'Cause I'm anticipating that I think if it's going to be this year, we certainly want to have something in there this year. I'm expecting maybe it's going to be next year, but even adding that into our financial plan early so that we can see it in there would be great.
Well, and I would agree with you because we may as well start putting money for it now, and I totally agree. I totally agree that the ERF fund calculations needs to be reviewed. That really worries me because we found that with the fire truck, suddenly what we budget is not what we're paying, and I think we need to really review that ERF fund, and sooner than later would be great. The other ones is the tax base. Of course, our tax base has changed a lot. There's a lot more people in Port Alberni. Construction is happening. Won't that alleviate some of our tax increase a little bit because now it's spread out more, or is that for the following year?
Madam Mayor, with non-market change, obviously, we have the option of diluting with the non-market change that we see in residential. We also see that in other classes too. Business had quite an increase in non-market change in 2022 or 2021 for the 2022 year. So that is an option. So when we bring forward the tax burdens to council, that's the opportunity to evaluate how we deal with that burden, and we see the shifting and balancing across all classes.
Okay. Two more things, and then I'm done. The roads, and when you talk about the roads and our budget for the roads, we didn't include sidewalks in there, or is that just in that whole package anyways, roads and sidewalks? Because we have a lot of issues with our sidewalks. Some are lifting and some are, they need in repair, need of repair. Is that included in that whole thing? Because I didn't see anything mentioned about sidewalks.
So Madam Mayor, within the roads and sidewalks, roads and maintenance, roads and street maintenance, I think it's called, the line item, that's where we would have any sidewalk improvements or cleanup.
Okay. And finally, I totally support our aging infrastructure and working on that, the roads, the sidewalks, the sewer, because that's, to me, has always been really important to us. And we have a very, an aging infrastructure from way back, and we're slowly getting it done, but it's not fast enough for me. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Washington.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. Andrew, I was also concerned about the inflation and how high it's going to be going in the next few years. That's all you hear on the news right now. So I'm glad to hear that you did account for that it's going to be increasing. A piece of pipe that used to cost $250 is now costing $1,000 or more for that same piece of pipe. And we all know how much a piece of plywood has gone up. So, you know, that is a concern in the budget to me. So that's great that you've accounted for that. A question, you talk about the service fees pay for the water and sewer, but is there a replacement cost included in that fees, or where do replacement costs come in?
Yes, so Madam Mayor, the sewer and water have a contribution to capital every year, and those support those capital projects. So right now it's about 50-50
Okay.
for those services. So half of it is going to the operations of those services, and half is going into the reserve or current year projects.
Perfect, thank you. And one more question about the curbside fees. They cover the expenses. Now, the grant funding that we receive, that only pays for the bins, correct? It doesn't pay for any of the services?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. The bins are covered in that, and the service delivery is covered through the fees and services. Remembering that the Recycle BC incentive is approximately, I think, about $290,000 that we receive every year for recycling component.
Okay.
So, and thankfully, you know, that was just recently increased, $4
Okay.
per household, which is about $28,600 year over year for the service to cover off fees. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Curbside, you got. When you said the public transit had a restart grant, is that part of the grant the city got, or did transit get their own grant?
Madam Mayor, transit had their own grant.
Okay.
So that was over the 2 operating years, and their fiscal year ends March 31st. So we see 3 more months of those funds in 2022.
And speaking of the COVID restart, or the COVID grant, how much of ours how much did we get and how much have we got left, or how much? You don't have to answer tonight. You can.
Yeah.
And I'd sort of like to know where, like, we start with X amount of dollars and where we've spent it and what we have left. But you can do that at a later time.
Yeah. So, Madam Mayor, with that one, what we will do is we'll bring a report showing the consecutive years of how we allocated those funds, and then the remaining funds allocated to the items that we've identified for council's consideration.
Thank you. And Madam Mayor, just one more question. Our bylaw services, I don't know the word, do they cover themselves in fines? Like the fines they do collect, does that take care of the department, or?
Madam Mayor, no. The only department that might take care of itself is building inspection, but that's only as of recently with all the fees that we recover from that service.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Washington. Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Haggard.
This is just a comment more than anything else, and with regards to facilities and the asset management plan, and this is something that we've talked about over the last few years, and I kind of categorize it similar to IRF, where we need to be putting money into the asset management for our buildings and our either building replacement, or if we wind up with a roof that has to be replaced, we seem to be caught off guard financially when that comes, and we just kind of go, we have to bite the bullet, we have to do it. And I maintain that we should always, I don't think you can call it an ERF fund, but we should have a rainy day fund or an asset management fund for our facilities. And I think that can be a discussion that we have through this budget process. But I'd like to see us start a fund that's an asset management fund or plan. And it can be either for replacing roofs and painting or whatever, but I think we also have to consider replacement. You know, when we went through this with the multiplex, and we always said, gee, I wish we would have been putting money away for a multiplex. We had 20 or 30 years to put some money away, and we didn't. And yeah, if we had been doing it for a pool, we wouldn't be talking about, you know, a major tax requisition for a pool or whatever. But it's just an abstract conversation that I think we need to have, and I think we would be forward-thinking if we actually developed a fund. I don't know if you want to call it a rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it, but I think it's an absolute necessity. And there's a lot of our buildings that are kind of in the same time era, and I think we're going to have a lot of our buildings all not fall down on us, all of us that are going to need some major work or replacement all around the same time. So it's just a comment, and thanks for bringing that up, and I'm sure we'll discuss that moving forward, so thank you.
I was just going to say that I think it's a best guess that our buildings are all going to need replacement at the same time. But I think that the first step to creating that fund is doing our asset management work. So that is an option that I believe we will talk about as a part of this budget. And I think it's important to note as well that we do have rainy day funds. You know, we have capital reserves, we have operating reserves, we have many different reserves, you know, some that are intended for specific purposes and some that are not. And, you know, if we need to do a roof, we can do a roof. But I think the overall intent is that we want to know exactly, you know, as informed as we can anyways, to exactly what the costs are going to be when, and make sure that we are saving appropriately into a fund. So yeah, absolutely. And, you know, along the lines of our ERF fund, and I've heard said before that not every community has an ERF fund. So we're fortunate that we do, and we're fortunate that the council, you know, back then decided to create it. Probably a couple of these councillors were on that council at the time. But I think that the first thing we need to do is make sure we focus on getting the asset management work done so that we really know what the scope of what we're talking about is. And another great example is the sewer and water fees. And while it's been somewhat difficult to increase at the level that we've had to, we now have, you know, we have information based on information that we're relying on in making those increases. And we know that we're going to be able to continue to do the capital work that we need to. So I think we'll aim to do the same with our buildings, and not just buildings, but there's a lot of different infrastructure that is a part of that as well. Andrew, did you want to add at all?
No, I think you mentioned most of the points that I was going to speak to, but you know, Councillor Polson, you're you know, just to reinforce that, you're right. It's just that asset management, having a plan that council is approving, and we set that plan in the financial plan so that we can move forward. Understanding the whole picture. And I talked about the asset retirement obligations. I think that was the whole intent of the tangible capital asset, the asset management drive from senior government, so that municipalities, councils have the information they need to make the good decisions on all their assets. Not just that, you know, that roof that needs to be replaced this year and it wasn't on the financial plan. We need to have those in the financial plan, and a plan to make sure that we're doing it effectively.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
I had this written down, and I forgot to mention my last questions, and you guys sort of went there already, but my comment was an asset management plan needs to be in place, exclamation point. So I think that's something that has to be one of our priorities coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil or Poon, any questions? Okay, Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, the only thing that I had noted, Andrew, you spoke about the RCMP contract, and I believe you said there's 34 members. We budget for 29. I'd just like that broken down a little bit. I realize that we don't pay for all the RCMP members, and there was a time, I remember the number was, I think, $174,000 per officer. I assume that's gone up. I don't know if you know the number, but I'd be curious to find out how all that breaks out. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, with the RCMP, I can bring back some more detailed information as far as costing per member, the allocation as mentioned, and talk with the officer in charge.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, maybe this is a question for you. The electronic platform ETown that we are going to have, how is that? Can you just give us how that's going to work out?
Great. Maybe Scott or Twyla
Okay.
could speak to what the format of the ETown Hall will be.
So probably similar to prior years where we've had opportunities where council, where members of the public can engage directly with members of the committee, and we would be monitoring our city PA platform site. Questions come in, we would read out those questions periodically throughout the meeting so that responses could be provided. There'd be public in attendance in the room, similar. So is that?
Yes, that's what I thought, but there's a lot of new people in our community, and it would be great for them to understand how that process works.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a couple questions. So the first one is, you noted when we went through payment in lieu of taxes that we're budgeting based on the actuals of what we've received over the last 5 years, but I know at least one of our payment in lieu of taxes has had an increase because of the ending of an accord. Are we budgeting for that, or are we budgeting specifically based on the last 5 years, what we've received?
We're basing it based on what we anticipated in this year, including the accord change.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. I had a question as well around the COVID restart funds, and I believe it was 3.2 million that we received. So really just getting an understanding of where over the last couple of years those were allocated would be great. And then just I'm expecting that we are allocating all of those by the end of this year then, and that we won't have any left over that were unused.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So this year we have to identify those for the 2022 year, and I make sure that they are specifically identified.
Great. So yeah, I think a bit of an update on that would be very helpful. The community gaming funds in our budget, are we budgeting for the full amount this year of what we typically receive?
Madam Mayor, yes, we are. So if there's any deficit that we anticipate, we could look at the COVID funds if we have any remaining to use that, or look at the funding avenues that we provide those funds to, and make adjustments or use taxation. So.
Okay, great, thank you. And I noted that we are returning council's training and travel budget to our pre-COVID budget. Curious, we already know this year, of course, that AVICC is going to be virtual. I believe FCM is virtual as well, or that might not have been announced yet, but I feel like we're heading toward a virtual conference there. So we're really just looking at UBCM and, potential other smaller events. Truck Loggers Association was moved virtual. We're expecting that Kofi will be virtual. As they were last year as well. So wondering, what did we spend last year? You don't have to give me that number today. And does it really make sense for us to budget at 100% for this year? I know it's not a huge amount, so it probably doesn't make a big difference to our budget, but it just seems unlikely that we will return to that 100%. And then my last question is just around the building fee, or building permit fee expectation. I know that we are expecting to have a report in the reasonably soon near future about building permit costs and pricing for that. And I'm wondering if council does change the rates, will the number that we are expecting to receive for building permits change for this year in our budget?
The Director of Finance and I, the amount that's in the budget is not it wouldn't be predicated on council increasing the fees. So if council, after information is presented to them, amended our building bylaw and did increase our fees, that would be greater revenue that would come in, that would be anticipated to come in. So we've been conservative, although they have gone up substantially, but that's based on current fees, but what is our anticipated construction, that we anticipate another strong year again. So if after consideration, council does amend our building bylaw, increase those fees, that would be additional revenues that would come in.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I just want to say that I really appreciate the focus on what our actuals have been over the last 5 years. It has felt almost challenging, but almost at times baseless to put a budget forward for council at least, and really not have an understanding of what each of those each of those line items actually ended up being. And because of the cycle of when we do our budgets and when our audit is done and when our actuals come out, I know that it's often difficult to have actuals for the previous year with a great level of confidence, but knowing that you're going back 5 years and really basing our budget lines on that 5-year history of what we're actually spending and what we're actually receiving is just gives certainly me a much higher level of confidence in the budget, and knowing that we're going to be staying within it. And typically, obviously, we do end up under budget, which is great, and we come back with a surplus, but we also don't want to be excessively over budgeting and leading to overtaxing when we consistently come in under budget every year. So appreciate you taking that extra look and looking back at that 5-year history. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay. There you go. We are all looking forward to that full budget document. And at this point, I think we will go to public input and question period. Thank you so much again, Andrew. Okay. Would any members of the public like to ask questions? Come on forward. So if you don't mind just keeping your mask on while you're at the podium, and stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Monica Alrus, and it's 3981 Exton Street. I have questions, and it has to do with public transit and roads. And I'm not really sure how far they are between each other. So because of the environmental issues that is happening all over the world, and when we look at Port Alberni and the incredible wide streets that has been designed from beginning, I think that I'm new in town and I'm not really sure how the system works. So I need some help and guidance from everybody. But what I would like to know is there possibility to make a beautiful trolley or electric train that would go from here, we say to Walmart, from Walmart down to the river, and from river back over here, so that people don't need to have their cars anymore. They can just jump on. And these brand new trains that is already in Europe, they are incredible and so wide. So mothers can go in with their trams into the train or trolley. People with their bicycles can go in. People with wheelchairs can go in, and they can jump off wherever they like. So for example, we say this Argyle Street here, it's huge, it's wide. Put it right in the middle and have it go up all the way so it goes then to Walmart where the shopping is, then come back, I believe it's Johnson, all the way down to the river, and then back. What I also would like to hope that we can somehow work with other governments is get the train back, so that we get the train from Victoria to Nanaimo and Port Alberni, so it can all work together, because we have the railway here, and the climate is warming, so this is preparing. I haven't heard any in this finance planning about this at all. And I think I would like to take all of you to a new direction. Now there is 30 different businesses plus that the city could utilize and start, and for example with soft plastic, rake the soft plastic from the water, from the ocean bottom, And with that, you can make petroleum. From that petroleum, you can have the tugboats go and utilize that. You don't have to purchase anything. You can reuse it from the soft plastic. And that would also be very beneficial for Port Alberni, especially when it's by the harbor. And another thing that comes in my mind, so there is so many different, but that is hazardous goods. What does Norway do with hazardous goods? They utilize the mountains. They drill the mountains, put hazardous goods in there, and close it. That way, and we have already the mountains. We already have the sea, and we have already too much soft plastic. So these are natural things that Port Alberni could be up and think from this moment on till 5 years from now, and you could be zooming and be #1 for Vancouver Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Firstly, welcome to the community, and thank you for coming to our council meeting and asking questions. I think that we can generally learn a lot from, some of the technologies and innovations that different countries in Europe are utilizing. And while they're not necessarily all initiatives that a municipality can pursue, I think there's certainly some opportunities there. And one of the opportunities is our very wide streets, and we talk a lot about that as a council. Some of our strategic plan initiatives are very much focused around the fact that our wide streets are a cost, to keep up, an extra cost to keep up, but also an opportunity because we have the space to focus on other methods of transportation. So, yeah, it is, absolutely. It is a positive opportunity. So, yeah. So really appreciate you bringing that forward. I wanted to let you know as well that we do work regularly with Island Corridor Foundation around the initiative of bringing passenger rail back to Vancouver Island. I meet with their executive director on a regular basis, and we are a part of the push as a community to make that happen. It is obviously, well outside of the city of Port Alberni's hands, but we're in regular communication and are working with them and working with the province on that. Thank you. Would other members of the community like to come forward to ask questions? Come on forward, Sylvan.
Hello, Madam Mayor. Hello, Council Ellen and all you wonderful members. My name is Sylvain, and I'm a startup business here in Port Alberni. And my goal was to operate a store, and I started renting a place here down the quay. And not long ago, there was a grant that was an opportunity for me to do renovations for the exterior part of the store. It's an actual small space, but compared to the other merchants, I'm the only one that doesn't have a rooftop. So I know, like, in the summertime, it's fine, like, even me, I'm like, I don't really need one in summertime. But when the wintertime comes and the rain starts falling, it might be something I would want to look into. So I came forward to ask you if you would be interested in considering having a fund or loan program for new startup businesses that use only infrastructure to operate from the city. Infrastructure from the city to operate, sorry. And so, yeah, this is my question.
Thank you, Sylvan. So we do have, I'm not sure if our project or program would work for that specifically or not, but we do have a program called the Facade Improvement Program that is aimed at matching funds and grants for businesses looking to improve the exterior of their spaces. Mm-hmm. I would encourage you, if you haven't, to speak with Pat Deacon, who is sitting right here. He is our Economic Development Manager and is a fantastic resource. And I would also say that the Harbour Quay really needs a larger revamp, and we've talked a lot about that as a council. What are the outdoor spaces going to look like? Are we going to encourage more patios, permanent patios? Obviously, there was some temporary patios during COVID that I think were really popular, but also came with a few challenges. So we know that the buildings need to be painted, and there's a lot more opportunity down there. And I think we feel a bit like we just don't have a plan of exactly what needs to happen down there yet. So I think that will be one of the discussions we have this budget. Would we like to start considering a design scheme for down there and some larger improvements, or do we want to start with smaller improvements and allow businesses to do more of one-off projects and, you know, bring each one forward? So I appreciate you coming forward with that. Would definitely encourage you to talk to Pat, and if you follow our budget process, which I'm sure you will, council will be having more of a conversation about the Harbor Quay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Okay. Are we sure there's no other questions? Okay, then with that, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And we do have a regular meeting of council next week at 2 o'clock, and that's when our budget will be presented.